Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Green Jeans. My name is Annika Van Rossum, and I am joined by my co-host.
Maya Vemrasam.
And if you don't remember, we are a mother-daughter duo who talks about important things going on in the environment, and our world, and just topics that we're interested in. And so we are back for our third season. We've been gone for a little bit while we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do to bring back not just like interesting and informative, but inspiring content because we think that there's a lot of great people in this world and a lot of great messages, and we wanted to make sure that we shared it with you. So I don't know, Mom, if you want to give people a little insight into what we think we're going to cover this season, maybe who our guest is going to be today.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this upcoming season. It's going to be about highlighting people who have in different ways used their talents to lift up environmental activism, social justice. So we're going to have a variety of different kinds of people that are using their own personal talents to help advance good causes and get other people inspired to get engaged and informed to get engaged, which is the perfect segue into today's guest, which is Justin Nobel. Justin is a reporter who has worked for outlets like Rolling Stone and the DeSmog blog, as well as others, reporting on the oil and gas industry and on other really interesting and powerful topics. And Justin has a new book that is coming out, Petroleum 238, Big Oil's Dangerous Secret and the Grassroots Fight to Stop It. So excited to have Justin to talk about his work, sharing, important, powerful messages and stories, and as a result, really inspiring people to get active to help protect communities and save our world.
Yeah, so we're super excited to have Justin on. And just a reminder before Justin hops on, we are, trying to get the message out about important work like these two nonprofits that my mom and I both, my mom leads is Green Amendments for the Generations and Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And I'm lucky to work at Delaware Riverkeeper Network and volunteer my time with Green Amendments for the Generations. So we'll be sure to tell you guys a little bit more about those. But just a reminder that if you'd like to support them, we will have donation links down in the show notes. And also, if you like what we do, make sure you rate and share our episodes because that always helps boost things on the various algorithms throughout. And you can help spread important environmental messages by giving us a good rating. All right, so we have our wonderful guest, Justin Noble, who has joined us. So, Justin, before we get into our questions, we did give a little intro about you, but maybe, if you want to give a quick intro about, like how you speak about yourself, how you view yourself, how you would describe yourself to people so they get, another little flavor about you.
Yeah, thank you, Annika. So I am a science and environmental journalist. I started out writing about all sorts of different scientific issues, how insects see in the dark and missions to the sun, and it was pretty broad and diverse. For the past 10 years or so, it's really been a narrow focus on the oil and gas industry. And about 6 or 7 years ago, I fell down this rabbit hole of oil field radioactivity, which takes us through to the book and the present moment.
Awesome. That's very cool. And so I think, something that where this season is about is the different types of activism and how people do what they do and really how, activism can mean so many things in so many different ways. It isn't just a person with a picket sign standing out somewhere. So, as a reporter, what made you like decide that that was the path you wanted to take? Was it from a young age, or you've kind of developed it? Because it does sound like, at least from writing articles about insects and seeing in the dark to oil and gas, that's like such a big evolution.
Yeah, there's a mode of journalism that really excites me. It's a really immersion and experience-based type of journalism, and it's a journey-based journalism. And so I had been living in Louisiana and spending a lot of time covering petrochemical development, Cancer Alley, oil spills. I knew about oil and gas, and then I moved back to the Northeast where I'm from, And the big environmental issue was fracking in the Marcellus and Utica. Huge oil and gas play going on in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. And I did not know much about fracking, even though there was a lot of great reporting already out at that time. This was, again, like 7 years ago. So the way I set myself up with a way to learn about it, which was to take a tour through fracking country. But going to your question, I intentionally wanted to learn from people who were really face to face with it. And often that is the activists, the organizers, people on the ground in communities. And so I set up this tour I called Hitchhiking an Energy Rush, where I took an Amtrak down from New York to Virginia, and I started up in the spine of the Appalachian Mountains, where there was someone named Nutty who was on a monopole. And you all probably remember this story. And Nutty was, blocking the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And there was a group of people guarding Nutty because the Forest Service was trying to prevent people from getting food and water to Nutty. And her allies are there to ensure that the pipeline company doesn't cut down the monopole. And it's a very effective way of activism. And so I really started this whole project by immersing myself and placing myself next to those people. And then I went from there into Pennsylvania, where people were protesting fracking in different ways, some pipelines, some well pads, general just oil and gas construction. Every step of the way, I got toured from place to place with people on the ground. And this is really a way to escape the idea of journalism where you're the parachute journalist, where you like go back to some comfortable hotel at night. Like at night, I would be with people in their farm or wherever they were. And doing it that way, though, you really understand and learn the struggle of what people in oil and gas country face. And you also realize as a journalist that they have the story already, whether it's recorded in their phones, in different journals or sound bites, or just literally recorded on their body and in their psyche, because this industry takes a very heavy toll on people physically and personally. But on the last day of that trip, someone told me that in Ohio, there was a company making a liquid de-icing product out of radioactive oil-filled waste. And that's an extraordinary news story. And that was something I then pitched to my editor at Rolling Stone. And it initially was going to be a little online news story. And then it became this huge magazine feature as we realized there was much, much more to this topic. And then it became a book. But yeah, from the beginning, I think one of the big revelations in this reporting is that it's people on the ground who are up close and personal and really facing the issue who have the most information about it.
So I want to take one step back. So you, just before you organize this sort of embedding yourself, you embedding yourself into communities and into really the culture of activism and what was happening around oil and gas. Did you have in your transition from your reporting, did you have a moment or was it a slower transition where you said, I'm really interested in reporting on all of these different kinds of topics, the bugs and the travel to space, but then said, but I do want to really dig in on this key impactful issue and write on it in a different kind of way? Or was it a choice, or was it a slow transition that evolved?
That is a really great question, and I appreciate you asking it. No one's ever asked that. It was a very specific choice. Yeah, there was a moment or a series of moments, time, when I was realizing that, you grow these talents as a writer and you harness this skill. And I started to think that it wasn't being used appropriately if I was just writing about things that that are interesting, but that many other people could write about. And I realized that there was a lot of serious industrial problems, environmental problems connected to social problems, and I really had an ability to tell that type of story, and it would really be negligent to not tell that type of story. And that type of story was exciting, but I think investigative journalism always seemed a little bit out of reach for me. You know, I came into journalism through the science store, and that was my skill set. And I would read amazing investigative journalism essays in Harper's and the New Yorker, but it never seemed like I would be able to tell that type of story just because I don't think I had the courage to. And that's really the key. You have to build that courage, and that comes with time. That can't just come right away, I don't think, at least not for me. But eventually I realized I could. You know, it's not that hard to ask Exxon difficult questions, and to, you know, once you have a whistleblower reaching out to you, know how to tell their story in an appropriate way. So yeah, it was really an active decision to not to really go into this world, which at once seemed unattainable, which is the world of investigative journalism.
And I mean, it's so cool because then I think, you know, I read your Rolling Stone piece about the Ohio radioactive brine, and then it also brought me back to how a couple months ago I got to hear you speak at a presentation, give a presentation at a coalition meeting, and I know there are so many different types of activists, not just participating but listening, and you talking about radioactivity and fracking and in the brine, and I personally had not even been aware of that until hearing you talk about it. And so I was saying to Maya, like, that was such a great way to spend like a 6 p.m. on a Tuesday night. It was just so interesting. And so I'm just curious too, as you've kind of gone through this, whether it was your intention or it's been, you know, very interesting that, you know, how have you felt about your work, really not just informing like the public, but really informing activists too, and giving people tools to, you know, you're an activist in your own right, and also giving other activists information that they probably wouldn't have because you're getting to talk to these people who a lot of us like can't even access sometimes, but they're sharing that information. You have this awesome platform to share it so widely.
Yeah, really. Excuse me, really good question. There's a lot there. So for one, I want to make clear, you know, on that initial trip, the hitchhiking energy trip, for example, I did reach out to oil and gas companies, and they might think this is crazy, but I wanted to do the same thing there I was doing with the activists. I wanted to like spend a day with them at work and then sleep in their office. Or sleep next to like an active well pad, and they show me what's happening. None of them, you know, took me up on that. But
Can I just say, I'm sure in hindsight, you're probably happy you didn't sleep next to the well pad, given all you now know.
Oh yeah, no, I knew it would be difficult, but I think that was the point. Like, what is it like, you know? And that's and it's terrible, yeah, but you need to in some way experience that. But they and so I always also believe I do not like Twitter and Facebook. I appreciate some of the power these social media tools have, but artistically and aesthetically, they're not interesting to me, at least. And I don't think they're always the best way to transfer information in the world. And so you're stuck in this place as a journalist where you spend 2 years, for example, with the Rolling Stone story. That was almost 2 years of reporting, which is an incredibly long amount of time for a magazine story. And then, like, you know, it gets tweeted the day it's published, and, you know, maybe something in the news happened that day, and no one looks at it, and then like it's done. So there's got to be a better way. And I think the better way is a type of on the ground engagement. And often that's going back to the communities where you did the reporting, and maybe speaking at a local school, at a senior center, at a community space, anywhere. But that over time became, a pattern, and I enjoy that. I think that's really important. For one, it's a way to get the information back, which I think is appropriate. It's not, storytelling can be extractive too. It is extractive, and if you don't appropriately do it, you're taking things just like the oil company is taking things, and going back and talking to people is a way to do it in a much more a matter that connects everything together in this fabric. But also going back and talking is a way to keep the journalism going, because it's often when I go back to a community and convey things to an organizing group, there might be a worker who attends that, and then I have new information and I have a new pathway to follow. So it's important to kind of shake out whistleblowers, is one way of putting it. But yeah, I also think for me, it's just exciting when a scientific or a public health pathway or an activism pathway can be followed from the work. I mean, that's what it's there for. And again, you're stuck as a journalist, like, here's your story, and here's these things you hope could maybe happen from it. And I think a lot of journalists are scared to make that connection, because they're like, well, I don't want to be an activist journalist, and it's my job to just put it out, and if people want to build something from it, that's them. I disagree with that. I think you can do some of the work to get it to that point. And that's an interesting discussion about the ethics of journalism, but yeah, I think it's fine to, and even it's your job, it's your obligation to help make those connections.
It's interesting that you say that, and I really appreciated how you talked about the importance of, that's the way I hear it, sort of championing your work to have it go out to the world and have an impact, whatever that impact is. And I sort of feel the same way about scientists, right? They're so often, there are scientists, they do great scientific analysis, they write it all up, and then they let it just sit on a shelf, and they don't go out to the community and explain it and express it and engage people. But then you have other kinds of scientists like Dr. Anthony Ingraffia, right? Specifically in the fracking, who has a lot of knowledge, done a lot of research, and rather than let it sit on a shelf, he took it out and explained it to activists, kind of like what you're talking about, so that it was actually information that had an impact and got used. So I really appreciate your being so mindful about the importance and value of championing your own work to make a difference, which to me it is activism, but it's also like something more. It can also be for reporters who don't want to be activists. It could also just be championing your work and making sure that people hear it and are aware of it.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Maya. And I spin it this way, people can say you're an activist journalist, and I'll say, no. If you're a reporter, say at Bloomberg or the AP, and you get a news story about a new project going in by a big company, it could be an oil and gas company, it could be any company, and they want to do something that they think is really exciting, and you write that as a story, and you don't really research the health impacts, and you don't really talk to the community and see how the person who lives next door is going to be affected, you are an activist journalist, but you're an activist in favor of the corporation. And that's not the job of journalism. We are telling the story of the people at the bottom. So I would call them an activist journalist, and I'm like doing like what the job should be.
I so appreciate that. That is such a great perspective on it. And I agree with you 100%. And my guess is Annika does too, from the look on her face. But now I want to do a little bit of a transition, because that's great. That's how you've taken your work and shared it with the world in different ways, right? But now you have a new hat, right? The hat that I think is new, the hat of author. And you have a book, Petroleum 238, Big Oil's Dangerous Secret and the Grassroots Fight to Stop It, which is really exciting. And I was wondering if you could do sort of two things now. Share with us a little bit about how you decided to now don the hat of author, and maybe a little bit about the book and what's in the book and how that emerged from your reporter hat.
Yeah. So I did publish when I lived in New Orleans. I co-wrote a book with a death row exoneree, um, which was a very different sort of story, a very wild New Orleans story. And we published that with University of New Orleans Press. And I see a book as, you have this amazing form, which we call a book, which is a way to take a small story idea to the next level. Some stories just cannot be told in a magazine article. I think a difficulty and often a critique of a lot of nonfiction books is that people will say like, well, this didn't seem that different. It was like a longer version of the magazine article, that sort of thing. And that's a problem, I think, with nonfiction books. You have a group of agents, maybe your publishers, saying you should turn your magazine article into a book. Well, not everyone has enough breadth and complexity to do that. But you have that option as a writer. And with this topic, it was clear pretty early on that there actually was a lot more than just a magazine story. But yes, this was a very different book than the Death Row Exoneree book, which, by the way, is called The Story of Dan Bright. And if people are into true crime and like the city of New Orleans or social justice, it's a pretty extraordinary story. This is a very different topic, and it was a little bit intimidating to think that I could turn this into a book, mostly because the workload of this topic is just insane. And to do one magazine story took 2 years, right? So, to like go beyond that, you start to realize how much work it would take to really get the topic and take it all across the country and to all its different spaces. And it's numbing, but yeah, I think there's a lot of room to like jump off the train. But it's also really engaging topic. So yeah, I followed it through and we have the book now. The book, I tried to do a couple different things. I really tried to make it exciting. I tried to make it, again, a journey. It's a journey through America, through this country we call the United States. And it really touches as many corners as I could. There's chapters in Mississippi. There's chapters on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation in North Dakota, Oklahoma, Texas. We really cover the area of the country. I want the reader to feel like they're on this strange tour. At times it's concerning and tragic, but you again have people who are very inspiring telling their story. And I think that in itself is uplifting and keeps the book engaging. And it's also, fun, to use a word that may seem inappropriate, but I think a lot of the people who get into this, you wouldn't be able to stick in this fight, whether you're a worker standing out to be a whistleblower, a scientist facing, like you say, people who actually step out to get this science out. They face a lot of criticism. You need some sort of lightheartedness as a person, or else you just won't make it through that. And so a lot of people are fun, and I try to bring that out too. I don't want people to put down the book. We know there's problems, but if someone like puts it down halfway because they're like, this is just another book about all these horrible problems, it's a failure. So of course we'll see if I was successful, but there's also a toolkit, Maya. It's a really, I think, important toolkit and way for people to hold this very powerful industry, very deceptive and conniving industry, accountable in a way that really they haven't been held accountable before, because there's a lot of new information laid out. And that's going back to your original question, Annika, that is one interesting thing about radioactivity. You can track it in a way that other contaminants in the oil field cannot be tracked. And that really helps enable this book. You can follow it through the environment, and there's some incredible science being done that is doing just that. And that, I think, will have very interesting policy and legal ramifications coming down the line. So I'm trying to make a pitch there to all the different groups of people I think would be, will be intrigued with this. And yeah, the book will be out April 24th. That's a Wednesday. It's the week of Earth Day. We have a really fun event that we're setting up in New York City, which is, that's kind of my roots go back to New York City. I was born there. We don't live too far away now. And we're going to have a book launch at a place called the Jalopy Theater, which is a really cool music space. My partner, my girlfriend, Karen, plays the musical saw and accordion. She's a musician and also a big part of the book. But she'll be there performing. Other people I know and am connected to. There'll be a musical component. There'll be a performative component. And then also there'll be people from oil and gas areas that we're bringing to New York, which is really exciting. To bring people in New York are great readers. They're engaged on environmental issues, but through hard work, they've been able to ban fracking, which is incredible. But we're going to kind of bring the oil and gas country into the heart of the city for this event, and I think it's going to be really special. So there's that if you're in the New York area, and then there's a whole series of other bookstores, community spaces. I'm giving talks all across the country in the months after that. And I'll make sure to pass along. I have a blog where I'm putting all that information. And that's probably the best way to follow it all.
That's awesome. So I'm hoping to, I have a question about your book, and then just while we're on this topic too, maybe if you could just tell people, where they'll be able to get a copy of the book, and then how to find your blog, so that they can keep up to date with all of this. So if you could, give people that, and then I have a question for you about your book.
Yeah, it's just like a little blog spot which lists all the information.
Awesome.
And I will send it along to you so you have the URL to smoothly pass on to folks. The book is the publication itself is something of a complex story. The book initially was to be published by Simon & Schuster. Simon & Schuster is a very exciting and well-known publisher in the US, a storied publisher. But last summer, it was announced that Simon & Schuster would be purchased by a notorious private equity company with significant holdings in oil and gas. So we pulled the book from Simon & Schuster. The book, which is a deep investigation into this industry, cannot be published by a company that is now essentially owned by this industry. And we went through a lot of effort to try and find a different publisher. But in the end, really the best route was to publish through Ingram. Ingram is the main book distributor for most bookstores and libraries in the country. And so by doing that, your book is immediately available through to all these places. So you can order this book. And the best way, I think, there's a page up now, if you Google it, on bookshop.org, which is a great way. If you don't want to support Amazon, you can get books through there. You can still find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble's website, Petroleum 238, Big Oil's Dangerous Secret, and the Grassroots Fight to Stop It. But really, I think the best way is to go to a local bookstore, wherever you live, and ask them to pre-order it. And you can do that. You can pre-order a book through your local bookstore, and then when it's released on April 24th, instead of being sent right to you, it'll go to the bookstore. And that's nice because then it alerts a bookstore about it. You think, oh, my book's going to be published, it's going to be in every bookstore in the country. Well, there's a lot of bookstores and there's a lot of books being published, and so no, they publish, they put like 10 new books up. So maybe it will be there, but you probably have to bring it to them, and that's a nice way to do that. And that's what I would encourage people to do, because we want to make sure that it goes, people beyond our group of people who are maybe interested in environmental issues can find it. So yeah.
Very cool. And then, okay, so that's awesome. So lots of great ways to do it. And I didn't know that about pre-ordering a book. So now I have my own new information. So that's really cool. But I was just curious because you're talking about bringing oil and gas workers to this event. And I think that's something that, is always so hard for people. Is it's hard to, I feel like the story always sounds like it's activists versus, the fossil fuel workers, not the execs, like the people on the ground. And there's so many times where it is like, at least in my view, I'm like, we want to help you. Like, we're not trying to take away your job because we don't want you to have a job. Like, we don't want you to get sick. We don't want people in the communities around you to get sick. Like, we want everybody to be healthy and happy and have a good life. And so I'm just like so interested how, you got these people in this fossil fuel industry to open up to you, and how that happened, and maybe if that was tough to start those conversations, or if it really seemed like they were, so fed up with what happened, they're like, I'll tell you everything.
Yeah, that took a, for one, that starts with the way I go about my journalism. I might believe certain things about the world, about what's happening scientifically with the climate, but I am not really trying to be opinionated. I am trying to lay out this particular story and cover all parts of it. And I am not, and I'm trying, as we've laid out in the talk, to really be as much a part of the community and in people's day-to-day existence as I can be, and as little of an outsider as I can be. And I am also really trying to get under the lid of this industry. And this is going to sound a little bit callous, but once you really understand how the oil and gas industry operates, you realize that that discounting their workers is really part of the economic model. Whether they've laid that out on paper formally or not, that is how they can continue to make great profits, is by keeping them uninformed and also promoting this very macho sort of, the person who wants a union is, is a loser. And that's like not something we do. We don't unionize, we don't complain. We go into the tank and we don't wear the mask. And we don't, complain when we come out like coughing up blood. Like, that is how the industry promotes that macho cowboy attitude. And this is where you get beyond, just oil and gas. I mean, especially when you get out west, oil and gas connects to this whole kind of like cowboy manifest destiny American history. That's all in there, and that all is cultured to really keep the worker at risk, but make them feel like they're doing something patriotic. Now, I'm not going to go through all those complicated social things with a worker, but I am going to show them information. And if they're already a little bit skeptical of that system, when they see information that shows that they're at harm, and the information is really credible, and then they have a couple like, bright awareness moments where they're like, oh yeah, I do remember seeing something else like this, they start to put together that they're being screwed over by the oil and gas industry. I guess they think people are stupid enough that everyone's just going to accept that they're being harmed and not care because they're doing a great thing for America and they're a cowboy or whatever. But it's not the case. A lot of people do, and they can't change that maybe because they're in a desperate situation, or they just love making a lot of money, and it's fine to get radioactive sludge on their face. But there's always been someone who stands up and stands out. And it's like a little bit of a chink in the armor. Once some people step out, usually what they do is they send the message along to coworkers, and then more people come out. And again, I'm excited and interested for the book to come out because I think it lays out so much information, and it will hopefully create a way for even more people to come out. And I'm working with some advocacy groups to try and set up basically a net to catch that, because there's going to be a lot of people with a lot of stories, and we have to figure out a way to get them out. And also, as you point out, to create a world where they do legitimately have better or different opportunities. And that's a lot, that's harder, much harder than it sounds.
So just one final question, Justin. You've talked about how the workers have been impacted, communities have been impacted, activists have been impacted, but you're reporting both in the magazine, in the news, in now the book, Petroleum 238, Big Oil's Dangerous Secret and the Grassroots Fight to Stop It. I want to make sure everybody gets that title. But oil and gas is, they're powerful. They got lots of money, and your reporting has outed a lot of their, as you say in the title, a lot of their dangerous secrets. So have you had any personal ramifications or received any personal communications or messaging or subliminal or direct as a result of your reporting, whether it's from the big execs, the industry workers, others in the community?
Yeah, I think yes, but not to, I always point out that people in communities in oil and gas country who choose to stand up to the industry receive much, much greater threats. They're much, much more at risk. And as a journalist, and despite what I try to do as an outside journalist, inevitably, I'm not living there. I'm protected in different ways that they're not. And I think their risks are much, much greater. The risk of a worker, even if they've retired from the industry, who stands out to talk is much greater. And the industry often does come down on people like that. And there's even a more subtler aggression, which just comes from, like, if you're living in a small community and you're the one who's protesting something you think is harmful, but everyone else has a job there, like, people don't talk to you anymore at the post office, and maybe, you don't get a bank loan. I mean, things like that do really happen. And I think those are the people who are really facing the risks. Yeah, the tool, as a journalist, you have a very special tool, or maybe it's not a tool, it's more like a card you can use, which is you can turn their aggression or their attempts to try and stop you, you can turn that into part of the story. We'll see what develops when this comes out, but I think the people in the communities themselves, that's really where those risks end up being the most severe.
What an honorable person you are, Justin, to really respond to the question that way by lifting up those workers and those community members who are being so deeply impacted. So I just want to, highlight that and thank you for being so honorable and caring and really working so hard to lift up the truth and lift up the people who are being impacted in the myriad of ways they're being impacted by the oil and gas industry. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you all for the really good questions.
So we want to remind people it's Petroleum 238, Big Oil's Dangerous Secret, and the Grassroots Fight to Stop It. And you can get it by going to bookshop.org, by going to Barnes & Noble, by doing a Google search and finding your local bookstore and asking them to please pre-order it now. And if you're listening to this podcast after the book is out, asking them to have a copy, and hopefully they have it on the shelves. And if they don't, tell them they better get it on the shelf right away. So Justin, just really want to thank you so much. And be sure to Google Justin Nobel's name. It's Noble. We will have URLs in the show notes, but Google Justin's name, read his articles in advance, sign up for his blog. We will have the blog URL in the show notes as well. Because we want to bring everybody back to you, Justin, because it's really powerful what you're doing. And we're all very, very grateful to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maya and Annika. And this is a common mistake, but it is Nobel.
Nobel. Thank you. Oh my gosh. See, look, I did that on purpose to create the opportunity for you to highlight that.
It'll be more memorable now. No,
it'll be much more memorable now. So I thank you for doing that. And my apologies for getting the spelling wrong. It's like literally sitting right in front of my face on a piece of paper spelled correctly, but leave it to me.
Mine wants to make it LE. But Google will correct you. So
there you go. Great. Thanks so much, Justin, for being with us and for all your amazing, amazing work.
Yeah,
yes,
thank you. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for that great episode. We are very glad to have such an awesome guest like Justin to kick off our 3rd season. It is definitely such a great story. His work is amazing, and I hope you all go check out his book and pre-order it. Or if you're listening to this when the book is out, you've already ordered it or it's already in your hands. So just to remind everybody again, give us a good rating wherever you're listening to us. We'll include all the links on how you can find Justin, on how you can get involved in Delaware Riverkeeper Network and Green Amendments for the Generations. But just in case you can't see any of the links, Delaware Riverkeeper Network works in the 4 watershed states, or throughout the 4 watershed states in the Delaware River, and that is delawareriverkeeper.org. And Green Amendments for the Generations works nationally to get you a constitutional right to clean air, pure water, and a healthy environment in a stable climate, and that is at forthegenerations.org. So go check out both of them, become a member, donate, get involved, whatever you can do. Every little bit counts, as you can see from our episode. And we are looking forward to you joining us next time.